What's going on, Celtics fans? What's going on, Facebook Live? What's going on, long-time listeners, new listeners? In between, middle of the road, I've been listening to a couple of episodes here and there, listeners. As usual, it's your boy Adam Taylor, joined by my boy, my compadre, my home dog, Mr. Will Weir, and we are not happy. Not happy with a game, not happy with a few games. We are not happy, period. Why? Because this team just does not have a path. We're looking at a complete and utter out to sea with no compass, no sonar equipment. We're just doing circles right now, trying to figure out why everything looks the same. Do you know why it looks the same? Because we're going in circles. Will, how you doing today, bro?
Yo, what is going on, Adam? You are on one today. Yeah, I mean, there's no sugarcoating it here. This is feeling like we're a couple days past Christmas. Big lump of coal for the Celtics. There's no other way to say it.
So, like, I was watching the Santa Claus. I look like for me, it's not Christmas until I watch Tim Allen's Santa Claus. Like, always been that's my Christmas movie. You know what I mean? Like, I watch that movie. I'm like, right, it's Christmas, and I'm big on like you do Santa Claus 1, then Santa Claus 2. So I don't know if you're familiar with these films,
Oh, of
but
course.
in Santa Claus 2,
I
he
haven't seen them in a while. I'll,
recreates
I'll say that though. It's not part of my consistent, Christmas rotation,
yeah, the
but I have seen them.
rotation.
Yeah.
So in Santa Claus 2, he replicates himself because he has to go and find a wife, right? And the replica
Yeah.
becomes out and he's like, right, everybody's getting cold for Christmas because everybody's naughty and nobody's following the rules. That's how I feel about the Celtics right now. No one knows what they're doing. They're all giving us lumps of coal, so we need to find a way to start getting some payback. And right now, I'm feeling fired up, and I'm not usually this emotional when it comes to my analysis, but I've had enough, damn it. So,
Yeah, man,
we're,
you ain't taking it no more. I mean, just to give the people either on Facebook or listening to us here on the podcast, I mean, Adam and I were chatting for a little bit, like we do, pre-show, kind of running through what we're going to talk about. Adam's in full Stephen A mode right now, so he's got some. I almost swore for a second. I don't want to make any extra work for you here, Adam, but Adam's got some stuff to say, and you people are going to hear about it.
yo, for real, man. I mean, the first things first, the one thing that really tipped me over, it ground my gears, it got my goat, it bamboozled me, hoodwinked me. I am going full Stephen A right there. Was following the game, Jalen Brown sitting in the media room talking to the press, and his one of his reasons for the team playing poorly was we've got no chemistry right now. There's too many guys in and out of protocols with the roster, the lineups changing, and blah 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 blah. Cry me a river. Where's Justin Timberlake at right now? At the end of the day, every team in the league is going through this. You know what I'm saying? The team that just beat you, the team that beat you down like a naughty schoolboy that had tried to steal someone's lunch money, had less good players than you. There was no Carl Anthony Towns. There was no D'Angelo Russell. There was no Anthony Edwards. Naz Reid, one of the best backup big men in the league, weren't there. No Jared Vanderbilt, a very solid defensive wing. They weren't there. They still came out and won. They found a way to turn Greg Monroe into a level 3 Super Saiyan and just absolutely dominated you from every moment he touched the ball. They weren't making excuses. They were more depleted than you. Jalen Brown, you're sitting there making excuses. You are the most talented player on that court that game. What I get it. He also turned around and held himself accountable. That's completely fine. I accept that. That's very. It's a mature thing to do. It's a very self-aware and humble thing to do. Is to hold yourself accountable when you underperform. I'll give you full credit for doing that. I believe that was a very good sign in your growth as a player, and you've done that previously. So kudos. But at the end of the day, saying you need to be better and being better are two completely different things. And we've heard you say you need to be better multiple times. We have yet to see it. And I'm getting very frustrated with the constant, the team isn't healthy. There's too many players missing. Well, the team like
Yeah.
Miami that have just been, just ran off a five wins, one loss in the last 6 games without Bam Adebayo, without Jimmy Butler, still relying on people coming in and out of their rotation. They ain't said a thing about it. They haven't said that there's no continuity. Why? Because it's next man up mentality. I just feel like we're getting a lot of words, there's a lot of narrative and rhetoric that we keep hearing from these losses, but there's nothing being put into action. Where is the tangible success from the action plan you keep telling us you have?
Yeah, I mean this is I don't think this is just a Jalen thing. I think this is an email thing. I think this is a widespread thing that we've seen throughout the season. And it's a lot of talk, a lot of words, a lot of acknowledgement to a degree, certain parts of self awareness, but the action hasn't been there. And when it comes to injuries and when it comes to COVID, it's insane, but it's insane everywhere, man. This is not a singular Celtics problem. To your point, last night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, you can't even call them the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like half their team was not there. Greg Monroe, who you talked about, woke up at 4 a.m., signed with the team, flew to Minnesota, had a canceled flight, had to reroute through Chicago, got to the arena just a few hours before the game, met his head coach for the first time ever in his life 2 hours before tip-off. By the post-game presser, just like we were finding out about Nathan Knight and Jay Norwell, so was he. So was he. So the fact that you have a couple guys out, and yeah, of course, Jason Tatum being out hurts, but you have Jaylen Brown, you have Al Horford, you have Robert Williams, you have Romeo Langford, you have Peyton Pritchard, you have multiple guys that are a part of your consistent rotation, and you can't beat basically a G League team. Get out of here with that. I mean, that's pretty much like, you just can't have that. You can't have that. The excuses can't be there. Every team is dealing with it. And with Jaylen, it was tough, man. So let me tell you this. I pulled a uke in a way. I wasn't able to watch the game live last night, but obviously being in the same, being in the US, I knew what happened. I knew it was lost. I knew that there was frustration. So I tried to hold off everything and I watched it this morning with my cup of coffee. I was expecting a worse game, but there were certainly moments where Jaylen Brown's play, like there were just passes that he was making that they weren't there. They weren't, the plays weren't there. He wasn't seeing things correctly. And when he's the clear-cut best player on the team, on the floor, when you take both teams into account, last night is just a result you can't have.
So here's my take, right? And I felt this way for a while, but last night kind of really consolidated it for me. Jaylen Brown is a star second supplementary player. He's a supplementary star. And I'm not saying he's as good as, or he is like, or his skill set is mirror imaged of, but I'm saying in terms of comparison, Jaylen Brown will always be a Scottie Pippen. Jaylen Brown will never be a Michael Jordan, a lead scoring guard. A lead scoring star. I just don't see it for him. I think that this was one of the best opportunities Brown could have had to go out there and show teams around the league. Obviously, his contract's still a few years away, but people remember when you really put people on notice, they remember Jaylen Brown went out there and took care of business. He was the best player on the floor and he conducted himself like a star. He conducted himself like no one on that floor deserved to lace up his shoes. He didn't do that. He went out there too tentative. Like you said, some of the passes he was trying to throw weren't there. He wasn't playing the type of basketball that would be conducive to him having a good game, drive and kick, rotate off ball. I felt very much like he was trying to lead by example, but that example was bad. And as a result, he led by poor example. We got poor results. Actions reflect leadership is always a saying that I like to kind of look back on. And I feel like Jaylen Brown's leadership led to some poor actions down the line.
So two things on that, Adam. So number one, let's talk about the Scottie Pippen being a number two, which to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that. And my question would be, did you, because right now you're very much on one when it comes to Jaylen Brown.
Not just Jaylen Brown.
Not just Jaylen Brown, but just for the sake of this section of the conversation.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because to me, I feel like that's how I've always viewed him, as a number two. So I'm not entirely like for me, it doesn't change my perception. For you, was there a perception, not just before this game, but I guess throughout this season, that maybe he was actually a number one or could be a one or could be, if you look back to the Lakers when they won the championship in the bubble, we kind of looked at it as like, oh, they're a 1 and a 1A. Now maybe that's changed since the way things have gone since then. But like to me, every time we've talked about the Jays and we talk about them kind of collectively, to me, the hierarchy has for the most part always been Tatum's the 1, Jaylen's the 2. Tatum's the guy that we see as potentially, has the potential to put himself in an MVP conversation, in a top 10, in a first or second team All NBA. Whereas to me, Jaylen's more, he's an all-star, he's a star, he'll get a couple of third team All NBAs, but that's where he is. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Did you view that differently? Based on what you're saying now, it feels like potentially, but I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that I ever viewed him as a primary option on offense, but for me, there's a difference between being a co-star of a team. Like Paul George is a co-star of the Los Angeles Clippers. Kawhi Leonard goes down, you can rely on Paul George to keep your offense to a very specific level in terms of his production, right? And that's kind of what I was expecting from Jaylen Brown's development, especially this year, based on his linear progression. Very few
Mhm.
players have linear progression.
Yeah, and
Was
we've
Jaylen
talked
Brown
about that before too.
was Jaylen Brown to emerge as a co-star, whether that be a secondary star, like a Tatum a one, Brown a two, or a 1A and 1B, however you want to look at it, it was a co-star. Now I feel like he's a supplementary star, and I feel like we've got enough kind of cachet in the bank over his career to be like, right, you're never going to be that co-star. You're always going to be that 2 or 3, second or third option. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think I know what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
saying I think that he was. I'm not saying that I ever thought that he had the potential to be on Jason Tatum's level,
Mhm.
but I definitely felt like he could be that Paul George type guy that when Jason Tatum's not there, he can step up and give you a very specific, you know what you're getting, excuse me, type of performance.
Mhm.
Where that's just not the case. It's very clear to me, based on multiple games where we've seen Brown play without Tatum on the floor for stretches as well, not just with the player being out. There's a lot of evidence of when Brown is being staggered with that second unit and he's tasked with leading them, that when he doesn't have a star player to play off of, his effectiveness nosedives and he
Mhm.
becomes more of a stagnant player. And that to me tells me he's supplementary and he hasn't, or he's incapable, or it hasn't happened yet of him taking that step towards being a air quote co-star. And that to me means that he now becomes maybe not expendable, but if you can find a way to flip Jaylen Brown for a co-star, then that's something that you need to explore, because at the moment you've got a supplementary star, which means you need you need two co-stars for your supplementary star to shine. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think I know what you're saying, and then there's parts of it that I agree with, and there's parts of it where I think that and this is a conversation that separately that you and our other co-host here as part of the three man weave, Greg, we're kind of having as to who Jaylen Brown is 6 years in, what he can still develop, what he has or has not had the chance to develop, and part of that in becoming that co-star instead of being that pure number two guy is going to be the playmaking, right? And that's something that we've seen Jason Tatum, who's had more time without Jaylen Brown on the floor, and he's been able to develop that at a quicker rate than Jaylen Brown has. And so with Jaylen, it's one of those things where because he's continued to get better in a linear fashion, which is not normal. For me, it does lead me to believe that he could still be what you're qualifying as a co-star versus a pure just secondary scoring option. I still think it's possible. And what I was looking to is, I think of guys, we look at the Chicago Bulls right now, Adam, and they're having an amazing season. They're playing above the expectations. I thought they were going to be good. I think they'd be this good. And a big part of that is the way Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are working together. But something that I think is very key in their relationship. Now, Lonzo's the main creator for that team, but something that's very key that I feel like I've noticed when watching them separately over the last couple of years is, we go into a game, we'll do kind of our pre-scouting reports, check in on, at the time the Spurs and the Bulls, see how their players are doing, what stats they have, where they're at in the league, because we're so tuned into the Celtics that sometimes when their opposing teams come in, we got to do a little extra research, on that team. And you'll notice over the last couple of years, Levine's been hovering right around 5 assists. DeRozan got up to just about 7 in San Antonio and was around 5, 6, the years before that. And that would always catch me as surprising. It's like, wow, these guys are at 5 assists. Maybe I should expect more from Jaylen and from Tatum as to where their assist numbers are. And then I'd watch the games, and part of me would come to the conclusion, oh, those assist numbers are just that high because their teams aren't very good and they just have the ball in their hands more often. They don't have less, they have less they have more responsibility and less equal levels of talent around them to distribute and share the load. But what I think you're seeing now with them in a competitive role in a more complete team, especially offensively, is that they're still having assist numbers in that 4 to 5 range. Their turnovers are both below 3. DeMar's over 2-to-1 ratio from assist to turnovers. But I think part of that is them having that opportunity to develop with the ball in their hands, be allowed to make more mistakes, be creators. And that is something, to be fair to Jaylen, that I don't think he's done a ton of in his career. And so with him getting better at every other aspect of his career as it's gone on, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he can't get better at this. And I think this time, which we're not sure how long that will be with Jason Tatum and COVID protocols, that's the silver line that I'm hoping to take away from this, is that he works on developing that rather than developing additional tunnel vision to saying, I just need to go one-on-one and do this and create some more, ball stoppage within the offense. So I think that's the counterpoint to like the second thing. I've just kind of gone long-winded here all the way around, but I think that is something that Jalen could still develop and become a co-star. However, I think neither one of them is ever going to necessarily be the playmaker, to the sense that you don't need to have another playmaker helping to initiate the offense, which gets into a whole other litany of
Yeah,
issues
which we can touch
that
on.
that are with this team.
I mean, so I'm just going to push back a little bit on the need, like Jalen Brown needs the ball in his hands to develop
Yeah.
that playmaking a little bit more, and then I'm going to go into the second point you said about a playmaker. So the reason that I feel this way, obviously, I try very hard to have well balanced and thought out takes. So this is one of the rare occasions you'll catch me a little bit emotional on things. Jalen Brown over the last 2 seasons has had a 28% usage ratio. So every 28 out of 100. Now, how can I put this? So every time he's on the floor, the ball will touch his, like he will initiate the offense 28 times, 28.3% of the time. Jason Tatum's, so just to make a comparison, is only at 31.5%. So it's only a 2.5% difference in terms of usage rate on offense between these two guys. Jason Tatum has developed into a guy that can read double teams, can see over the trap, can pass out of the trap, can punish the trap, can orchestrate out of the pick and roll a little bit more than what Jalen Brown can. And I get it, they've ran Tatum in pick and roll actions more to like expedite that development. But Jalen Brown has the ball in his hands just as much, realistically. 2.5% is such a minuscule number, that just as much as what Jason Tatum does. So if we're saying that Tatum's been given the opportunity to develop as a playmaker, well, that opportunity has been afforded to Brown at the same time, because they share equal loads of the offense. So that would be my pushback there, especially considering the way that Stevens last year and Udoka this year have staggered the two quite considerably throughout games. That both of them have had their opportunities to develop their passing skills. I just feel like Tatum's kind of been open to being coached in that region more than what I would say Brown has. Again, this comes back to like, the Horford thing where he said no comment and whatever there. Like, I just feel like Tatum might just be a bit more of a coachable guy, to be quite fair. And then you touched on and obviously we don't know this. This is just conjecture. I'm not saying I know it as a fact or from any sources, because I have none. The only sources I have are what's in my kitchen cupboard, But and then you touch on, maybe they need a playmaker. Now I've stopped saying the Celtics need a playmaker, and I've started viewing it more as they need a connector. The big thing.
Tell me more about that. Tell me what you mean by a connector.
So somebody that can connect the two of them together through playmaking, through their ability to read the offense, through their ability to initiate plays, to force defensive rotations, whether they're on ball or off ball. If we want to keep with the Chicago Bulls as an example, I think one of the reasons that DeRozan and Levine are playing so well together is because they've plugged Lonzo Ball in as that connector, as that guy that can initiate offense for them, can quarterback a little bit, and when he's off ball, he's moving off ball and creating defensive rotations based on his 3-point shooting gravity, based on the way he cuts and the way he's coming off ball screens. He's connecting the two of them together at all times, because teams have to respect the pass. They have to respect the shot. He can defend 1 through 3, 1 through 4 on the perimeter. He can switch onto the block, which means he's constantly connecting the two stars together and taking pressure off them, allowing them to play in positions and areas of the floor that best suit them. Tatum and Brown don't have that, and I don't think they've ever really had that. I think that Gordon Hayward was probably the best connector they've had, and I think that if he came back now healthy, the way he's playing for the Hornets would solve 70% of what the Celtics are going through in terms of connecting. So I think at the moment they don't need a playmaker as much as they need a connector. Sometimes that's hand in hand. Like Ricky Rubio, I still die on this hill. Ricky Rubio having a career year out in Cleveland would have been a fantastic connector for this team. But, you could look at like a Draymond Green, who's not a playmaker, would still be a fantastic connector for this team from his ability to orchestrate offense vocally. There's many ways you can do it, but they just don't have that guy.
Do you think Domantas Sabonis would be a guy like that?
I think he'd be closer to what they need than anything they've got in the cupboard right now. I just don't think. I think his defensive, so when I view a connector, I view it on both sides of the floor, right? It
Yeah.
needs to be someone that really glues everything together. And I think that Sabonis would help be a connector on offense, but I think he'd leave a lot to be desired defensively,
Do you
which
think his
could
defense
end.
is that bad?
No, I think it's bad enough to the point where if you're trying to bark out orders on offense, but then you're getting beat on defense, are people still going to keep listening to you? You know what I mean? One of the things that makes Marcus Smart such a vocal voice within the Celtics locker room is the fact that he constantly gives you 150% on defense. That's why you can forgive him. Like, just the players will forgive him a couple of heat checks. But again, his passing also helps become part of that connector. Draymond Green, again, the reason he's such a vital cog in what the Warriors do is because his defense connects everybody. It helps guys, helps hide Steph Curry a little bit. It helps expedite Klay Thompson on the break when he's healthy. Do you know what I mean? It needs to be someone that really glues it all together.
I mean, I think ideally, in an ideal world, I 100% agree with you. But I just think most teams have to be, and I think specifically the Celtics have to be okay with a little bit more balance. Like when you look at a team like the Warriors or the Suns, even the Jazz, like you look at them and it's like, man, they have such great balance offensively, defensively. You feel like they can be malleable. They can do a little bit of everything you want, but that's really, really hard to do. I think you can still be a really good team, even if with Marcus, because like you said, he gets a little bit of a pass at times because of how much he connects the defense. So if there's something on the offensive end, and it isn't, I don't want to turn this into a bashing Marcus thing because that's not what this is. But using a guy like Sabonis on the other end, I think sometimes maybe that trade-off of having that guy that connects you on offense, especially when you see how stagnant this offense becomes time and time again in the fourth quarter, and having a guy like that, where if he's supported by guys that are excellent wing defenders in the Jays, if it's possible to pull off a Sabonis deal and you're not giving up Rob Williams or Al Horford and you still have someone on that backline defense, and then you plug in, whether it's a Josh Richardson or a Romeo, I don't know, whoever else is going to be on that perimeter. I think that still works because that's one of the big things for me with Ime is just I think he really struggles at trying to find balance specifically at key moments in games between when we need offense, when we need defense, and how to kind of fluctuate between the two, because that's what all those top teams can do, is they can fluctuate between what they need and when they need it. And this team is really struggling to do that. And I think at times, we're looking for that perfect fit, and it's a very imperfect roster. And so you have to kind of work with the tools that you have in the kitchen.
But then, if you look at some of the best teams in the league right now, so you use Phoenix. If you could name a player on Phoenix that you would class as their connector, who would it be?
As their connector, I mean, honestly, it's probably Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, I've got Jay Crowder.
I mean, I think they're cut from the same cloth.
Very similar. That's why I was like, yeah, I've got Crowder. They're very similar. They're going to give you defensive ability. They're going to give you offensive ability. We're not talking about a star. We're talking about a guy that can be your pillar. You know what I mean? You can plug him in and he's your pillar on both sides of the floor. He's going to be able to lead you. You look at Utah, you could lean on Mike Conley as that guy. You could maybe even look at Royce O'Neal. He's very important for what they do. Doesn't you look over at Golden State, I've said it's Draymond. You look in the East, for like Brooklyn right now, you'd probably argue it was Nick Claxton. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? Like the
East
Celtics
is funky, but yeah, I get your point. Yeah,
you know what I mean? The Celtics just don't have that guy they know that they can rely on for a consistent performance that ties everything together on both sides of the floor. They just don't have that guy. And honestly, I think that if Brown could develop into that role, then being that secondary star there would be perfect. But right now, I don't have the faith that he will. I also, when you talk about Udoka, I just have no faith in his coaching at the moment. I genuinely believe that a lot of that comes down to, here's an example. You're coaching this game against the Timberwolves. It's far closer than what you expected it to be. You're in the last 3 minutes of the game. Timberwolves are leading a little bit. It's achievable, you know what I mean? Or you're just right around, you're tied up or whatever it was. I can't remember the exact score. A good coach then starts calling out set plays. From the sideline, you start calling out whatever it is you want to run. I'm not talking about just a principle. I'm not talking about running wide where it's just a screen that gets somebody the ball. I'm talking proper set plays. You get your team ahead. You basically take the reins. Do you remember the first Fall movie?
The
Four.
first four.
Yeah, four. I can never say, my accent doesn't let it come through properly. Like Marvel's, God of Thunder 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a scene in that where Odin's on his horse, and he kind of lifts the horse up and he leads the army into battle.
Mhm.
And that's what you want Udoka to do at that point. Just everywhere just stops, and Udoka's like, right, give me the reins. We're gonna run play X, then we're gonna run Y, then Z. We're gonna build. We're going to get some easy looks and get 7 or 8 points ahead. And then we'll go back to our freewheel offense and we'll really lock in on D. And he's not doing that. He's very much just letting the chips fall where they lie, like fall where they may. And that's just not good enough coaching for a team that clearly doesn't have it at all. This team is not constructed to just be able to freewheel an offense, freewheel a defense. And I think that, and I said this on a YouTube show I'm doing. If you don't follow my YouTube channel, it's at Adam Taylor NBA. Hit that subscribe button. Deuces. And the reason I tell you that is because every episode of the Celtics pod gets put on YouTube. So if you want to see my lovely face, you want to see Will's lovely face, Greg's lovely face, that's where we're at, man. Back from our regularly scheduled program to our regularly scheduled program. One thing I said on a recent YouTube show I did was I genuinely believe there's a developing culture of apathy that's forming throughout this roster, where everybody's very apathetic. Oh, we need to be better. We need to do this. And no one's doing anything about it. And I think that Udoka's holding guys accountable, but it's very rare you hear Udoka hold himself accountable when Udoka's a big part of the problem. His rotations are questionable. Pritchard, did you see my tweet earlier about Pritchard?
I did not.
So Pritchard took 14 threes yesterday, 7 of them front rimmed out. Yeah,
I did see this. Yeah.
When you front rimming your shots, it's a lack of power on the shot, or it's a lack of arc, or both. Pritchard has played 23 games this season, averaging around about 9.3 minutes a game. Yeah, the last 5 games, Pritchard's averaged 30 minutes a game. It was inevitable that his legs got tired. It was because you haven't ramped him up slowly. It's like, here's your 9 minutes a game, Peyton. We're going to develop you slow. Bang, we want you 30 minutes a game. Oh, Pritchard, your shots aren't falling. I feel like Udoka runs these guys into the ground. If you're going to sign these 10-day guys, put these 10-day guys on the floor, even for 3 or 4 minutes. We know they're in the league, but they're not in the league for a reason. But at the end of the day, they're there to allow your guys to get a bit of rest, to be impactful. Rotations are bad, defensive bad, offensive bad. Udoka is bad. That's my take.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to add on to that because I feel like we've had this conversation about Udoka, already 4 or 5 times. And the toughest part is not seeing progression from these mistakes that we've seen in games earlier. And, I try to, in my mind, preach patience. He's a rookie coach, still developing. But it's the same mistakes, and even with these, the roster being hit with all these, COVID protocols, there's been some silver linings. Like, for example, he has to play Peyton Pritchard, which now, if you're willing to play him, 45 minutes a game, how are you going to justify to me if this team is healthy again in a week or two that you're playing him 11 minutes? You just played him 45 minutes. So don't you dare try and justify to me that he can't play 11 minutes. Like, that's just absolute nonsense. So I can't have that when he comes back. But with Ime, we have a different cast here with all these protocols. But it's the same thing that we've talked about before, right? Kind of preset plays, preset playbook. I got to stick to, these couple of guys here. When you see the game going sideways, why not plug in Joe Johnson? Why not plug in, Broderick Thomas? Why not give some guys some extra moments, some extra minutes in here so that, you can have fresh legs from guys that you need at the end of the game? It's just such clear mismanagement from Ime that it's hard to find a silver lining, and it's just getting more and more frustrating. And it's unfortunate. He's a rookie head coach, so there does need to be that patience that I mentioned, but it's trying times for sure, Adam.
And here's the thing, right? It's like, if you're not giving guys an opportunity, you're not going to find diamonds in the rough. You don't think that some of these 10-day guys are going to find a spot somewhere because they've shown something. Greg Monroe will put.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Adam. But to your point, look at the entire Timberwolves team last night. Yeah. That team barely knew each other, and they look more cohesive than our entire unit.
And this is the thing, right? And like, you can talk about chemistry all you want, but some guys are just hungry and they won't make it work. And I think that's something that's missing from this Celtics team, is a hunger. There's nobody there that's really hungry right now, and they say they are, but they're not playing that way. You know what I mean? And like, I think that's a big thing. Like, Udoka's not giving guys a chance to be successful. And CLNS Media put out something today, so yesterday for anybody listening, on their Celtics All Access page. And it was like a 7-minute discussion between John Zanis, Jimmy Toscano, A. Sherrod Blakely, and Bobby Manning. Shout out to them guys. They all did excellent work there. And their whole thing was, it was very much predicated, well, the last half of it, so like the last 3 or 4 minutes, was very much predicated on the Celtics player development. And the question that they raised were, are the Celtics committed to player development? Because if you look at the players that are on the roster right now, Neesmith, Pritchard, Langford, to a lesser extent, Rob and Grant, have they really developed these guys? I mean, Grant went away in the summer, worked out on his own, lost that weight, developed that 3-point shot. You can't put that down to the team's player development schemes. John Zanis of CLNS made the point of saying that Robert Williams basically just forced his way into the rotation by being impactful. It wasn't that they developed him. It's just that he was like, yeah, I'm sick of sitting on the bench. Watch me go do some nut stuff. And then you look at like Pritchard, Romeo, Neesmith, they get minutes, but they're not put in positions to develop. They're not. Romeo is meant to be a guy that's slashing towards the rim and exploding around the hoop. You're not putting him there. Neesmith is a movement shooter. You're asking him to spot up and then punishing him when he misses. Pritchard needs to be used more off the bench to develop a playmaking off the dribble game. Do you know what I mean? And it's only the last 5 games while the team's short-handed that he's getting the opportunity to do so. Otherwise, he's just a floor spacing guard that's undersized, and you're really underutilizing the guy. So if if Udoka and his coaching staff and the front office aren't committed to developing these guys, well, the impact is twofold. First of all, your young tradable assets are diminishing in value because they're not improving, and teams will be less inclined to see them as a boat, like an upside in a deal. And secondly, you could be missing out on somebody that could be a highly impactful player for you in 18 months if you gave them the opportunity to develop into the player that their skill set dictates they are. So I think that's another issue. I don't necessarily put that all at Udoka's door, but he's definitely partly responsible for what we've seen this year in that scenario too.
You know, this is where President Brad Stevens comes in. And, you know, just like to your Robert Williams point, his hand was kind of forced by Danny Ainge last year when he traded Daniel Tice to have to play Rob Williams. So as much as that was, you know, part of a, you know, saving some money on the luxury tax, that was also, you have to play Rob now. We're taking away, you know, your safety net in Daniel Tice, and you're going to have to play Rob Williams. I think potentially as we look towards, you know, that February 10th trade deadline, this is where, you know, depending on, you know, it doesn't seem like at this point the Celtics are going to be true, you know, competitors in the East. I think, you know, obviously the not making the play would be a god awful disaster. I think they're still in that play-in range, and so you kind of have to start to think ahead. And I think something that, you know, Brad Stevens can do is, like I said, if this team's healthy again and Ime is still not giving Peyton Pritchard minutes, that's unacceptable. It's just completely unacceptable with what he brings to this team. And as far as developing him and continuing to grow his development, you know, Chris Forsberg shouted out in the broadcast about his offensive numbers and how him being on the court helps the Jays. Everything on this team should be geared towards helping the Jays, who need to help themselves, but you need to help them as well. That's a part of this. And so what I think that could lead to by that February 10th trade deadline is if you can move Schroeder to get some future assets, you force Ime's hand into making him play a guy like Peyton Pritchard. So I think this is where potentially, you know, Brad Stevens, depending on what happens here over the next couple of weeks, we have another about, you know, 5-6 weeks before we hit that trade deadline. You're going to start to hear some of those rumors, and it's going to be Brad Stevens, you know, making his first real move, because everything he did in the offseason, I think he did a great job just upping the talent level with a very constrictive, you know, budget to work with. But now what's that next step? What's the next step that President Brad Stevens takes? And this is where I think he may have to start forcing Ime's hand into doing some things that maybe he's not comfortable with, but, you know, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and that means that, to me, it's like, if Brad feels the need to do that, the question is, are Brad and Ime on the same page of what they want, what they envision this team being, or where they envision taking this team? Because the worst thing in the world that you want right now is for the head coach and the front office not to be in line with the vision of this team. And if Udoka is going against what he initially discussed with Brad, well, that's going to lead to issues itself. Mm-hmm. So while I completely agree that Stevens may be in a position where he needs to take away Udoka's ability to kind of go against player development. If Udoka agreed on developing these guys when he took the job and now he's not doing it, well, then that's a completely different discussion that would need to be had, right? Because at the end of the day, if I tell you I'm going to do X, Y, and Z when I take a job and I do A, B, and C, well, I'm not really fulfilling my job tokens. Yeah, Will's just got a new dog. His name's Taco, man. What's going on, Taco? Yeah, right.
Taco,
Big fast dude.
Come here, boy.
Go on.
All right, let me get him out of here real quick. Give me 1 second here, Adam. I'll let you. He's got big views for a minute here.
Yeah, so I'm telling everybody, man, if you watch
like
on YouTube,
he's getting like his namesake.
If anyone's watching on the YouTube show right now, you would have took a quick glimpse of the puppy. He's a big dog. He's a very, very big dog. Cute as hell. So I'm sure Will's just gonna remove him from the vicinity. I would have preferred if he kept him. Everybody needs a therapy dog. But look, I am a little bit fired up today. I do feel like Jaylen Brown let us down a little bit. I do feel like Ime Udoka's not working out the way everybody hoped. I do feel like when you look at some of the veteran pieces around the team right now, where do we stand? Like Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, I feel like they have trade value right now. And here's another point as well. Say you do assume that Jaylen Brown is a supplementary star, which means he's technically like a 2B or a 3. Yeah, for in terms of like pecking order, which means you need that second star because co-stars you could have Jonah Hill and Seth Rogen, and that movie's good. You throw James Franco in there as a supplementary star, that movie's excellent. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that kind of mentality? But how do you get to that third star, that second star? How do you get to that co-star? Well, the first thing you need is to have some draft assets. Now everyone's like, oh, the Celtics own all their own picks, things are going to be great. Not really, because the common consensus will be once you acquire that co-star, your draft picks are going to be worth diddly squat. We're talking late first rounders or late second rounders, depending on what you give up. So if I'm Brad Stevens and I'm like, yo, we're going to have to position ourselves to bring in somebody else. We don't want to lose Jaylen. We don't want to lose Jason, but we need to add somebody else. Well, now we need to start acquiring draft assets from other teams so that those draft picks aren't predicated on your success. So they hold a little bit more weight in trade discussions. And that's when you do need to start building up trade value with younger guys like a Neesmith, like a Romeo, like a Pritchard. But you also need to keep in mind that, Brown's halfway through his extension at this point. You know what I mean? There's only 2 years left after this season until Brown's a free agent. Sneaks up quick. If you don't think he's going to stay, maybe you use him to get that co-star.
And that's where, like, it's not a fun conversation to have about the Jays, but it's one that, it's in the consciousness because it's relevant. Like, it just is. And now for me, I think it would be extremely rare for me, or not rare, but I think it would be out of left field if something happens in season. But I think certainly by the time you get to the off season, you want to at least be exploring all options and, have an idea going into next year of where you are going with this franchise. Is it the Jays and we're fixing everything around them? Are we taking one of the Jays and trying to find another piece that works better, provide complementary pieces around that? I don't know what the answer is, but the reason that the conversation exists is because it's going to become a reality very, very soon that you need to go one way or the other. And, you talked about it before. We're not saying just give these players away. They're extremely valuable. So a lot of it's going to depend on what you can get in return. But the NBA moves quickly. Windows open and shut rapidly, way before you think. I mean, think about it. Just a couple of years ago, when you have the Jays, you have Gordon Hayward, you have Kyrie Irving, you have Al Horford. This team's going to 3 out of 4 conference finals. And most of the time they're, at 80% health, 75% health. And you're looking at this team and you're saying, man, this team is going to run the East. That changed really, really quickly. So things are going to move and you just have to be prepared for all of those. So I think what happens from now until the trade deadline will be some tea leaves that we can certainly read into as to what Brad Stevens and this front office are thinking as far as the future goes. And I think this offseason will be extremely telling.
I mean, because I don't know if you're the same as me, but if this team's bad, but you can see a clear plan, there's a path that they're treading, they're walking down a specific road, I'm completely fine with that. I was here for the rebuild. You know what I mean? I'm cool with that. If you're bad and there's a reason why you're bad, fine. You're bad, but you've got Romeo Langford developing. You've got Neesmith developing. We're seeing signs of Grant Williams becoming a great glue guy off the bench. We're fine. That's fine. But right now, and I said this before, last year and for like the previous 18 months, the Celtics straddled a line between contending for a championship and rebuilding. And what happened was some of the stars didn't like that. They like, you weren't all in on contending. So you lose Gordon Hayward, you lose Kyrie Irving, you lose Al Horford. As a result, along the line, you also lose a Marcus Morris, you lose a Jay Crowder in trades, you move on from Aaron Baines, and not only does your starting unit get weaker, but your bench unit gets weaker. That the talent level there regresses. So now, fast forward 18 months, you're still straddling a line, but now the line you're straddling is between getting into the playoffs and rebuilding. So you've literally sat on the same fence, but the fence has got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And now you don't have to take a jump. You just need to take a step. You know what I'm saying? And I feel that's where we're at right now.
It's like the I think it's like a meme where it's like the guy poking him with the stick. Do something.
Yeah.
You just got to do something. We got to do something because
something,
where
yeah.
we're at right now is just not working. This team is consistently inconsistent. And there's so many different. I mean, this is why we keep circling around this conversation. There's so many different aspects of this team and organization that we just need to kind of find that direction, and maybe it will play itself out. Maybe by the end of the year, we'll look back and say, hey, that was a cloudy time, but we've kind of found the path through the clouds. But right now, we're certainly in the middle of those clouds, and it's really hard to see what the path ahead is.
I'm very sad.
I know, man. This has been a sad podcast.
It's not good for my blood pressure, bro. You know what I mean? Like, man, I woke up this morning and like I've got to the point, and this is bad. I already expect to have seen the Celtics lose, so I don't even turn my notifications off anymore. I'm just like, it is what it is. I wake up, I check my phone. I see, like, I'd put a tweet out yesterday saying how many players the Timberwolves were missing and how the Celtics should have enough to get through. People are quote tweeting me like this age badly. I'm like, okay, they lost. What a shock. Then I go on to like group chats that I'm in, whether that be the Celtics blog Slack or whether it be the Celtics legend or whatever it may be, and I read the comments there. Now I'm like, yo, I don't even want to watch this game. Like, I don't want to have to. I'm going to go get myself a cup of tea. I'm going to watch some TV for a little while, just relax. Then I'm like, right, it's time to start work for the day. I've got articles to do. I've got YouTube to record, podcast to do. Got to watch the game. Can't talk about something you ain't seen. Man, did I feel sad after that game. And then
I feel you, man. I feel you.
And then you ask yourself, you're like, I love my job. I love the fact that I get to do what I do for a living. But at the same time, it's like, man, that was a bad. I just didn't want that start to my morning, man. You know what I mean? We're 2 days after Christmas, bro.
I know. I had to do this. So last night, I'm in El Paso, Texas right now with my girlfriend's family for Christmas and the holidays. And so last night we with her family, we went and saw Spider-Man. Great time.
Is it
great
good?
Movie? Oh, it's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It's unbelievable. And actually, I'll be honest with you, Adam, that's my second time seeing it. So I've seen it twice now. Oh, yeah. Well, see, we had seen it once because we couldn't wait. And then we got here, and a few of her cousins and her brother hadn't seen it. And so they proposed the idea, and she's like, would you be okay seeing it twice? 2 seconds, instantaneously. Let's go. Book the tickets. And so I didn't actually see. So I only saw the first quarter live last night. So I knew I was going to watch it this morning. So I kind of had to go through your experience that you just described. Left the theater, and my phone is just full of whether it's, friends of the Celtics, friends of mine that aren't fans of the Celtics that are relishing in the, the state that we're currently in. But my phone is just blowing up. And I even, Greg and I did a podcast for our other show earlier today. So same as you, pulling double duties on a team that I was not happy to have my morning coffee and watch a game where I knew what to expect. I knew what was going to happen. I knew Greg Monroe played great. I knew Jay Norwell played. I knew, Nathan Knight was going to go off. And you're just sitting there waiting for the misery to happen. And now I had to talk about it 2 different times today. It's been tough times, man. It's been tough times. But here's the thing. This season is so freaking weird. Tell me this, Adam. Would you be shocked if we end up back here, in a couple days and somehow the Celtics beat the Clippers and Suns back to back?
No, not shocked at all. It wouldn't change how I feel.
Exactly.
But I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah.
That's the whole thing, is we're like, just as much as they're stuck in that state that you mentioned a few minutes ago, so are we as fans, because the highs are there, the lows come just as quickly right after. So it's really tough to figure out what to make of this team. And I don't know. Check back in on Friday. We'll tell you how we're feeling then. It's probably going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we're gonna do our best. We're gonna do our best. Until then, I hope everybody had a great Christmas. I hope you are getting ready for the new year, staying safe, doing all the fun things with the family, the friends, the partners. If you've enjoyed this show, which honestly I think you should have, because we're entertaining and we're fun, whether or not it's sad or not, we would like you very much to scroll down on your phone, find those 5 stars on the if you're using an Apple device. To be 5 stars, they're transparent, they're translucent. I like that word. Press the 5 star, the 5th star. What will happen is it'll pop up gold and it'll be like, ta-da! You've left us a nice 5-star review. Helps to show out enormously. If you do that, if you scroll a little bit further down, there's like a message box. Tell us how much you love us, why you love us, what you could do to make us, what we could do to make you love us more, and we will happily work on that too. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I appreciate it. We'll appreciate it. Make sure to follow the show Celtics Blog Podcast on Apple or wherever else, and you can catch the other episodes that we release through the week. If you don't have an iPhone and you're not watching on YouTube or on Facebook, then my boy Will here is going to tell you what you need to do.
Word of mouth. Shout out to Ludacris. That is always a great way to go ahead and spread the good word of the Celtics Blog Podcast. So if you're like me, you're hanging out with family this week, make sure you tell your aunt, make sure you tell your uncle, tell your cousin, tell your god cousin, tell your godson, your goddaughter, tell your nieces, nephews, anybody that really wants to enjoy some fun Celtics talk in the middle of a really unfun stretch. Come join us. Come hang out with myself, Adam, Greg, Celtics Blog Podcast, 3-man weave. Tune in.
Namaste.